Esoteric Discussions, a show that gives a voice to the hidden and unspoken aspects of our world, tackling topics in the realms of the metaphysical, the esoteric, the political, and social. So now join me, your host, Valentine S Aubyn, as I take you on a journey of exploration. Hello and welcome to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host. I am Valentine S Aubyn, and this is the show that explores the deeper and hidden aspects of our world. I'm here every other Wednesday evening, well usually, but at the moment I'm currently doing every Wednesday evening while we are broadcasting live from 87.7 FM. So you have me for the next couple of weeks still. I'll be back next week for another show as well. So I've really been enjoying coming through to your homes and into your cars. That's if you're listening via transportation or at home, and it's a great experience for the station as well, and hopefully we will be able to do this on a permanent basis very soon. So we've all been working very hard to make the best of this opportunity, so I hope you do appreciate it. So it is the 3rd of July 2013, and well, you know, can you believe that we are almost halfway through the year? It is not, I mean, is it not just mind-blowing? It's going so quickly, and well, there's been a whole lot of things going on in the world. We're not going to be able to cover a lot of the politics and issues all in one night, because I do have a fully packed show, but at some point I do want to have a rundown in regards to what has been happening over the last 6 months, because we are in a very particular point of time, as myself and so many of us who are aware of where we are on the timeline. These years are extremely important, lots of change in the air, and well, you know, a lot of things are dissolving, and it's not by fluke. There is a purpose here, and it's not going to just happen overnight. It's going to be a long process, year after year, just a wearing down of the economy, a wearing down of the old, as new ways of being and thinking and living come through. I mean, that has always been the way. There's nothing new here on the planet, of course. It's just that we are in an accelerated period of time. So we're seeing some extraordinary events. And of course, we're seeing these magnificent uprisings taking place worldwide. And those will continue to grow. They won't be going away. And as we get into 2024 and forward, as we get into Pluto into Aquarius, that's when we're going to see the true revolutions. So we have a lot coming in our way. But before we can get there, we have to be ready mentally. And so shows like myself, Esoteric Discussions, and also other shows that are here on at the station, Red Alert Radio, which I used to do with Alex G, but I haven't been able to because of my own busy commitments and things. But you know, shows like these, we're trying to help you see the underbelly and look beyond what we have been always taught to be true, because there is a bigger picture here, and we can't bring in the new until we face some of these old ways of thinking. And that brings me to my show tonight, because I have a fantastic show for you, as I always do, but I just know you're going to love this one, because we're talking about ufology tonight, a topic that we've covered before a few times now on the show. And It's a topic that's very close to my own heart, as I love to write about these types of issues myself. And I am joined in the studio, and will be joined in a few minutes, by an author who's come all the way from Scotland to come and be with me this evening, by the name of George McLaren. And he has a wonderful book, which, he wrote some time ago. But, things are always timeless, yeah? So he's going to be in the studio with me shortly, and we're going to be having a conversation about his work, his passions, and his interests. So it's going to be a fantastic show. And, what I would say to you, if you've never looked into the idea of life in other places, the concept that we are not alone, what I would say to you tonight is to try to clear your mind and take a step back, because when you start to weigh the evidence, it's very hard to refute, but you have to allow yourself to have new information. Having new information, it can make you feel uncomfortable. It can cause you to feel a bit unsteady in your life, because everything that you thought you knew, you have to relearn. But once you get over that hump, and it's a very big hump to get over, you will be surprised and amazed by what is actually true and how we have been lied to. And these lies are on so many levels. They have been lying about history, about science, about technological advancements that we are currently doing. And of course, they have been covering up the fact that we are not alone in this universe of ours. And we have had so much evidence to support that we have had contact. And there's so many people now starting to come forward. So, it's an interesting time. And I like to call this period, and I'm not alone in this. I think there are a few others saying this as well. This is the time of no more secrets, and we see that with people like Julian Assange coming forward with WikiLeaks and pushing information to be put out into the open. And of course, the latest, is Snowden trying to push information forward. Appreciate what these people are doing. It's needed, and we need it in a variety of different areas as well. It's just not in the political sphere. It's in many other spheres of our world as well, walks of life and things like that. So this is where we're going. No more secrets. So it's time for you to open up your mind. And it's time for you to not be afraid. So I'm going to get my guest into the studio with me, and we're going to crack on with this interview. So sit back and relax, and we'll be back with George McLaren after this.
You don't need your radio or your PC to listen to Peterborough FM. Use your smartphone instead. Just use your browser and connect to www.peterborough.fm. and click Listen Live.
Peterborough FM, the station that listens to you.
My guest is here with me, so I'm going to open up his mic and introduce him in. George, hello, welcome.
Hello.
So, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you for travelling all the way from Scotland to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's very nice to be here.
And, of course, we've spoken before in the past. You have been a guest on my show previously, and I enjoyed our conversation, although it was riddled with...
gremlins.
Yeah, kind of like it is tonight.
It doesn't really surprise me. This seems to happen an awful lot to me.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I had a guest on, maybe over a year and a half ago now, by the name of Roy Dutton, and you would really love him. He was a fantastic person, individual, very, very intelligent man, and he worked in the British aerospace industry for 40 years, and he worked tirelessly trying to get a lot of information together and researching by himself. He wasn't funded by anybody, just doing his own thing, collecting case studies of sightings. And basically what Roy did was he plotted he plotted a theory, and his theory in a very basic sense, was to say that we had been watched for a long, long time, and he could prove it because he could prove the paths taken by UFOs, the trajectory that they would take. According to the sightings people would notice across the UK. And he put all this information together, and he found out, what directions they were coming in, places they liked to hit more so than other places, like Stonehenge, for example. Made lots of sightings around that area. There would be certain zones across the country that would have more sightings than others. And, you read his book, there's no way that you can refute that there's enough evidence to suggest that there is something going on. So,
yet many people choose to try and refute it, which I find strange.
Yeah.
I mean, when the evidence is in front of you and people can't see it, then I find that rather sad. If we were to send an expedition to the Amazon and find a lost tribe, the sheer volume of evidence we have about UFOs visitations would be taken as proof positive for the situation in the Amazon, and yet we've got this huge amount of information, sightings, descriptions, and people just, I think they don't want to believe because it would alter the entire paradigm of their life.
Well, I like to, this is my take on it, which is I think the way that we're educated, first of all, is being used against us. That when we go to school, most of us have not been homeschooled. Most of us have gone to the institutional way of being schooled. And you're taught to think in a certain way when you go into these places to learn. And it starts from when we're young.
Yeah.
And if we were taught, because children have an open mind, they're innocent, they have an open curiosity when they're young. And then as we get older, we get indoctrinated, don't we? And if we were able to hold on to that innocence a bit longer, meaning allowing ourselves to look at nature and not be so arrogant to think that we can control everything, that we can appreciate nature, that we can be in one with nature. I mean, wow, what a concept, huh? But if they were to teach us these things amongst all of the subjects that we have to digest, we could have a different world. I mean, it's not difficult, is it? To change things.
I get the impression that in Scotland, they're actually beginning to allow children to open their minds. I mean, I have a grandchild at primary school, and they have a philosophy class where they're encouraged to discuss what might be considered quite wild subjects like ufology. Is there anybody else out there?
But I think the Scottish are, and they're like the Welsh and the Irish, I think they're ahead. And no offence to English people. I mean, I'm born in this country, although I grew up in America, but no offence to English people, but I have spent some time in Scotland. I did some postgraduate work in Scotland, and I enjoyed the way that the people were there, and it is different. But the English are very much like the Americans, and it's they have a different approach to how they want to run things. Yeah. If you know what I mean. So
they teach you what you need to know to be an artisan.
Yes,
that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, talking about artisans, let's talk about this wonderful book that you wrote called The Watchers. Mm-hmm. And you wrote it maybe 10 years ago now?
9 or 10 years, yeah. Somewhere about then.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I said it to you off mic, but I just have to say it for others to hear as well. First of all, I don't read a lot of fiction these days. Mm-hmm. I don't want to waste my time. And I don't mean that to be rude. You get to a point sometimes where you know what you want and you know what you don't want. And if I'm going to read fiction nowadays, it's got to be stuff that's going to blow my mind. Yeah. And there's the publishing world has become too focused on money, and you don't always get all the great kind of just down-to-earth kind of stories coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that I like are things that you've written about, you know.
Excellent.
And it's not always easy, though, to find good science fiction these days as well, you know. So I try to stay away from reading a lot of the stuff that's out at the moment, and also because I write myself, I'm a writer myself, I don't want to get my work confused with other people. I don't want to be infiltrated, you know, or so, you know, if I do have an idea, because this is what happens within the creative world, is we all tap into ideas at the same time. And it's not just the creative world, it happens in engineering and the scientific community. You know, there's all these souls, we come in at certain times and we tap into this unified consciousness, as we can call it, and we're all being downloaded in our own ways, you know. So I want to be downloaded in my own way and know that I haven't tried to copy anybody or anything like that. So I've been staying away. But I have to say, I enjoyed your book.
Thank you. That's lovely to hear.
And I would say that for anyone who's listening tonight, they can get a copy through Amazon.
It's actually
second-hand copies and
there are second-hand copies. It's actually out of print, but I'm hopeful that within the next couple of months I'll have re-edited it for Kindle ebooks. So I'll certainly be working on that. And
yeah, well, this is what I was going to say to you, because obviously the publishing world has grown a lot in the last 9 to 10 years. Yeah, I mean, in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And it's being surpassed. You know, the old paradigm of the publishing world is struggling to sort of keep up with all the new technology and way of doing things.
That's right.
So, yes, you have Kindle, but also because you have such a great voice vibration, you should be doing audiobooks.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
You can narrate your own story.
I was actually asked in the past to record some of my own poetry for an American audience, which was quite nice.
Yeah, you have a very, very nice, deep voice vibration that people will pick up on.
They thought I sounded a bit like Sean Connery, which...
Well, it's the Scottish accent.
Well, he came from not a million miles away from where I was born, so...
Yeah, well, no, I think that's good. But I just thought I would say that because, you know, sometimes it can be a lot of work trying to retype or whatever you have
Indeed,
to do. Yeah, you know. But, you know, you can easily also do audiobook. And I say that because someone said that to me, so I'm passing the information on to you.
Thank you very much.
And anybody else out there listening who might be interested.
And it's actually probably easier because you know what's going on, you know what's influencing the characters, whereas somebody brought in to read it would not necessarily read it the same. So
yeah, but I know there are lots of people nowadays who don't want to read or don't like to read or whatever. There is a lot of that around these days, and that's because, you know, again, people are changing as well. You know, I mean, there's all these big movies that people can go and see in 3D, and they want to be entertained. So I suppose sitting down to read something can be a bit arduous these days. So
yes, we have to learn how to read with our ears. Yeah.
So that's the new way, I suppose. You know? So it's an option. But I mean, what I liked about your book was, well, I have to say, first of all, I loved that. I don't want to give too much away with the plot line, but I do just want to pick up on a few things. I loved the character Beth. And she shouldn't be my favourite, but you know what? I loved it.
Well, my wife is called Elizabeth, and she's called Liz for short. She absolutely hates the term Beth. And although there might be tiny little parts of her in there, it's not, you know, it's not really her. And I had to stress that to some of my friends who read it. I said, no, this is not Liz. But I was really taking the mickey a little bit by using her name. Well,
you know, this is the thing. Nobody likes a writer lurking around in the family, because this is what you get, right?
Indeed.
But she reminded me of, if you ever watched Goodnight, Sweetheart, Yvonne.
Yeah.
She reminded me of Yvonne.
Yeah.
And the relationship as well between the two of them reminded me of that relationship.
Yeah, she wore the trousers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I loved that. But I also loved the expression, the close encounters of the Fife kind as well.
Well, of course, Fife, not a lot of things are written about Fife, so hopefully I can use that as my main source of inspiration.
Yeah, and I was pleasantly surprised that, yes, the book was based in Scotland, and, you talk about the River Tay, and I know the River Tay from Dundee and going back and forth to Dundee. So I liked that. But obviously, I have to ask you, I mean, not everybody will sit down and write about ET contact and those types of things. So I have to ask you, George, have you ever had your own experience?
I've never had my own experience of either contact or seeing what I would regard as a UFO. I have neighbours who have, and I believe what they saw to them was a UFO. I don't think they were imagining things. I had an experience which I couldn't explain. I was taking my wife and children across to a village called Falkland, and it's very hilly where I live, so the road was a country road going over hills and down dales, etc. And as I was coming up to the top of a hill, I saw a World War II bomber flying between the hills along a valley. My kids were sleeping in the back of the car, and I said to my wife, "Did you see that?" She said, "See what?" And it was as plain as you are to me just now, what I saw. A World War II bomber flying where it shouldn't have been. My first impression was the Lookers Air Display was only a few weeks away. Sometimes people practice, but it was a horrendously dangerous and low place to practice. And I've never yet been able to explain what I saw. I was driving at the time, and it was there. It was just bizarre.
Well, in the clip that I wanted to play, which I didn't get to play because we have gremlins in the system, which is really unfortunate, because it'd be a nice sound bite just to get the audience to have a better understanding. But basically, the clip was about how because the MOD back in 2010 released some classified information to the public. So if you wanted to do your own research into UFOs and things like that, those files were now available. And there were about 2,000 that they released. I'm sure there's a whole bunch more.
Oh, I'm sure there's a great many more.
There's a great many more. But those are the ones that they wanted to release to the public. But even within that, there's enough information there to keep someone busy to try to find an answer. And I think the bottom line to all of this is, and I know that you and I are on the same wavelength here, is that these experiences that people have, like what you've just said and what you've just described, there's so much of that. People experiencing things that they can't explain, that fall outside of the parameters of what should be. But then we just are told to push it to the back of our minds.
That's right. Don't worry about it. It's just an aberration. That's
right. But obviously, what's your opinion in terms of, is there life outside of where we are?
My personal opinion, and I look to science and people that I believe are beyond reproach, like astronauts, airline, military pilots, police, people that are trained observers and from whom there are thousands of reports of UFO sightings. My belief is, again from science as well, is that the universe is full of life. There is life in abundance out there, but we're talking about distances so vast and numbers of star systems and galaxies so vast that it's no surprise we haven't yet found anything. I mean, I'd just like to put into context exactly how big our galaxy is, because I think many people don't realise that if we could get every single person on the planet, man, woman and child, counting one star per second, all of their lives, in fact, it would have to be immortal. They don't eat, they don't drink, they don't go to sleep, they just count one star per second. and continue, it would take something like 1,000 times the length of the remaining life of the universe to count all the stars.
That's incredible.
Now that is so mind-blowing. It is so arrogant for people on this planet to say, we're it, we're the pinnacle of the universe, we're all that there is. I mean, when there's that sheer volume of stars, and scientists now reckon that planetary systems around stars are the rule, not the exception like used to be thought of. So there are a huge number of planets, a mind-bogglingly huge number of planets.
Well, they've been finding all these new
That's right.
solar systems. I mean, I just took some notes. Is it Gliese?
Gliese, yeah, that's
581,
right.
and it has like an Earth-like planet.
That's right, yeah.
Orbiting around it, and Kepler 22b.
Yep.
The Kepler 22b system they have found that it has a habitable
That's right.
Earth. I mean,
it's in the habitable zone, potentially life could arise there.
Yeah, I mean, and these are quote unquote, mainstream scientists, coming to these conclusions. These aren't fringe people.
No, not at all.
So,
I mean, it used to be that perhaps before 50 years ago, in fact, well, let's take it back to near the beginning of the last century. The only galaxy known about was our own. We thought there was lots of stars, but we thought that was it. We thought that was the universe. And about 1925, they found out that little smudgy stars weren't little smudgy stars at all. They were entirely new galaxies. And now they've calculated that there's at least 100 billion galaxies, each with an average of 100 billion stars. And that is an astronomical amount, literally, in the proper sense of the word.
And again, these numbers are just mind-blowing.
They are. You can't envisage those numbers.
Really
you can't think of a football stadium full and say, how many football stadiums? It's just totally beyond trying to imagine that kind of number, which is why I gave the example that the entire, population of the planet would have to count for many, many times the life of the universe to even count them all. And there's 7 billion people on the planet all counting at the same time.
Yeah.
So it is mind-bogglingly big.
I mean, we've come a long way, I think, with the theological school of thought. I mean, I noticed in your book you did raise issues of religion. Well,
in the book, it's kind of like a Noah's Ark, in that a civilization came to Earth on a holy crusade. They were called to come here. And the purpose of making it like that was to say to people that my own impression is that if God's out there, and I have a religious belief, if God is out there, why would we be all that he created? A gardener doesn't go and stick one flower in the middle of his garden and say, that's it, that's lovely. A gardener will create lots of life. Why would God not do the same? He makes this vast amount of stars and planets. Why would he not experiment with, life everywhere?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So, I mean, when I've got a lot of Christian friends, and some of them are upset by, they think we're God's chosen people, we're God's elect, and all the rest of it. And I say, but yeah, perhaps we are on Earth, but who's to say there's not many more out there? I didn't stop at having one child. My daughter didn't stop at having one child. Why would God stop at having one child? Yeah. So I wanted to get that kind of idea across. So I wanted it to be science fiction, incredible, but I also wanted there to be a spiritual aspect to it, because most of us, whether you believe in a God or not, have some sort of spiritual belief. It might be beliefs in very strange things, but it's still spiritual. You don't have to believe in God to be spiritual.
That's right, yes.
But believers in God are spiritual, but it's not the same thing.
That's right, yes.
So I wanted to get the spirituality element into the story and open it up a little bit.
And I liked that. And, obviously, in the last few years, that the Vatican, they've now come forward to say, well, if there is life out there, they would be our brothers and sisters. So,
that's right.
And they've gone full circle with themselves, haven't they?
They have indeed.
Right,
I mean, they've actually apologised now for... who was it? My memory for names is shocking. Astronomer.
If you
Galileo.
The one that was, yeah.
Galileo was under house imprisonment by the Vatican for his radical beliefs. They've now, just a few years ago, apologised.
That's right.
A tad late, but never mind. And I know for a fact that there is a Vatican astronomy school. The Vatican have astronomers in some of the major telescopes in the world.
To say, George, yes. Well, they have the Lucifer telescope, which is an acronym.
It would have to be.
But yes, they have the Lucifer telescope, and they have the whole hierarchy of astronomers and stargazers.
Yep, and
they've always gazed at the stars. They just did it in hiding.
But now they're acknowledging the fact that believing in life elsewhere doesn't negate a belief in a God.
Yeah. Right.
That to me never made any sense. And it still doesn't. So that was the reason it was in the book. And the Vatican, I think they did this very quietly.
Yeah,
I only found out quite recently that not only does the Vatican have scientists, that they actively involve themselves in stargazing, if you like. They actively involve themselves in astronomy.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Because they now want to find out. In fact, I think they would probably like to find out before the rest of the people, so they could say, we knew all the time, we announced it to you. Before, and that's not going to happen.
Well, and I don't want to give too much away with the plot line in your book, but they've been waiting for those signs, haven't they, according to scripture?
That's right.
So they're looking for that sign as well. And as I opened up at the top of the show, we are in what we know now. It doesn't matter if people want to believe this or not, but for those in the know, when we follow the timeline, when we follow where we are in terms of cycles of things, we are in a particular period of time, so... We are
due a paradigm shift.
Exactly.
There's a lot of scientists, and I'm influenced a lot by science because I love immersing myself in astrophysics and whatnot, because there's just so much. There's a lot of scientists saying we are overdue a paradigm shift. Now, whether that'll be a wonderful new source of energy, when it'll be the discovery that, yes, aliens are out there... I don't know what it'll be, but for the past 10 years or so, I've just been waiting for this wonderful thing to happen.
So I am listening to you.
Oh, sorry. I was being distracted by...
Our cameraman is busy taking pictures.
Yes, I was being distracted by my aid memoir, here to prompt my memory.
Oh, yeah, but, and these are the things that I talk about on my show. I take it from a different point of view, maybe not so much of a scientific point of view, in terms of the paradigm shift. But we're on the same page here. I'd
like to read you something that is a very short quote from Carl Sagan, who was not only an author, but he was an astronomer and an astrophysicist as well. And he said, quite simply, somewhere something incredible is waiting to happen. And I believe that we're on the cusp of something. I don't know what it is, but
it's
there.
Well, we are definitely. It's here. I mean, it's not, and there's no waiting anymore. I mean, it's already begun. And what we're going to do, George, is we're going to take a quick break. And on the other side of the break, I want to get into issues of things like disclosure with you.
Yeah.
Because that would then help to precipitate this shift, this paradigm shift that you were just speaking of, that I've often so many times said on this show, that my guests that I've had on my show often talk about, but it has to be done in small, it shifts within ourselves. I mean, so it's not going to just happen. It comes from us. So we'll talk about where we are with getting people's minds to open.
Okay.
We'll be back shortly.
You don't need your radio or PC to listen to Peterborough FM. Use your smartphone instead. Just use your browser, connect to www.peterborough.fm and you're in. Simple.
Hello and welcome to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host. I am Valentine S Aubyn. My guest with me this evening is author George McLaren, and we are talking about his book that he wrote called The Watchers. But we're also talking about ET, UFO contact, and we're going to start to get into something that I enjoy talking about, which is this whole disclosure issue. We've already had a quite a fascinating discussion, George, but I'm keen to get your views on this. I want to ask you about SETI.
Yep.
Now, SETI was created by Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan
was one of the
Carl Sagan was one of the supporters. It's not fair to say that he created it, but there were a couple of other organisations before SETI which basically did the same thing. And Carl Sagan was a supporter of the idea of getting everybody together instead of a couple of little ventures, get them all together and all be in the same, reading from the same page.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm a Carl Sagan fan, but
Indeed.
I have to say, I think he reminds me of, he was another Dr. Hynek, Dr. J. Allen Hynek was his name, who would have been before Carl Sagan, who was a very big man in the scientific community in the world of astronomy, and he was brought in by the government to debunk. That was his role.
Yeah.
And he was that person who, behind the scenes back in 1947 at the Roswell crash, helped to bring in all of the confusion and misinformation.
Yeah.
And he went on to do many things. He was around for a long time. And I feel that Carl Sagan knew a lot. I felt that he knew a lot, but would not say it, could not say it. And Dr. Hynek, because I've had his secretary on my show. She was a guest a couple of times, Anne Eller. And she said Dr. Hynek was constantly having UFO sightings of his own. They would not leave him alone, okay? And I don't know too much about Carl Sagan's personal life, but I think he was very much of that level as this other scientist. And I think there's just a lot that he wouldn't say,
The thing with people like Carl Sagan, the other astronomers and physicists who joined SETI, they relied on government funding. You don't get government funding if you upset the government. And astronauts are sworn to secrecy until they get close enough to death for them to say, I've not got long left, what can they do to me? And then they tell their stories. Physicists in the US just now, in fact, all scientists in the US have to rely on the government for funding. And there are a lot of things going on that shouldn't be going on. Some blue sky thinking is being shut down because the government doesn't like the way the research is going, so they withdraw support. SETI has had support now withdrawn from it, so it is it's like a company. It's set up. It has its own incorporation. They raise funds for themselves. The government no longer fund them. So if he had been alive today, he would probably be able to come out and say, now the government aren't funding us, I can tell you what I really was thinking, what I hinted at in my books, what I hinted at in the films that were made.
Yes.
I mean, he made...
Contact.
That's right, Contact. And you couldn't have a better illustration of what was going on in his mind than Contact.
Well, this is why I say I knew he knew more.
I
that's
believe
one of my favourite movies. I've never been able to read his book. I've never had the time, and I do want to sit down at some point and read the book. Yeah. But I loved the movie. Yeah. The
movie was very good, and I believe it was quite faithful to the story. And it's quite funny because there's the outgoing head of SETI. I'm not sure if she's the head scientist, head astronomer. A woman called Jill Tartar. The Jodie Foster part was based on her. She was called something else in the film. And Jill Tartar's been approached several times, and do you think that part was based on you? And I think it was. I think it was a little pat on the back. We'll call her something different. She'll have a different background, but basically, she's you.
And, have you come across, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, have you come across the work of Dr. Stephen Greer et al. With SETI, which is the Centre for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence?
Not knowingly, but I got a terrible memory for names.
Well, and this is my other worry with SETI is, are they ever finding anything? Because SETI have just a backlog of experiences, video footage of UFOs. They communicate with them. They go on. What they do is a bunch of researchers, and they go out and they UFO hunt, and they capture it on video, and you see them flashing lights, and then you'll see these lights flashing back in the sky. I mean, there's just so many different things, and they have a database on all of the different strange and bizarre events that have been happening, like the Phoenix lights as well. Which was a big one. That was massive.
Oh, absolutely.
Phoenix lights that happened in Phoenix, Arizona back in 1999. No one can miss it.
No, indeed. But people still deny it.
Yeah, but it's because, I mean, do SETI, from what you know, have they come forward with anything? Because I really don't know.
SETI's actual remit is to look further afield. It's not SETI's remit to try and find UFOs or have contact here. It's SETI's remit is to look for some form of signal, which has to be
radio signal.
Yeah, some sort of signal from the deeper into the galaxy and beyond, something which had to be made by a civilization, something which couldn't have arisen spontaneously. And up until recently, I mean, computers are exploding in the way they're developing and how quickly they're developing. But even 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to see the amount of sky covered by SETI in maybe a month, you could hold a pin at arm's length, and that little bit was all they could do. Now, if you look at the size of the sky, it is enormous. And people have been SETI's been criticised for not finding anything.
Exactly.
And
yes,
I saw a very good illustration by a female astronomer, I can't remember her name, who sat on a rock beside the Pacific in California and said, she put a glass into the water, picked it out and said, "There's not a fish in that. Does that mean there are no fish in the sea?"
Yes.
And that is a wonderful, this is all we've managed to explore. So is it right to say we haven't found anything, so there's nothing there? Seth Shostak, the head astronomer in SETI, has actually said in a documentary made just a couple of years ago that he expects something within 20 years. And if not 20 years, certainly by the middle of the century. Now, I hope it's in 20 years because then I've got a chance of seeing it.
Yeah.
But unless I live to be, 100, then I'm not going to see it if it's the middle of the century. And he believes that, and he believes that because the power they've got just now in their computers, in their telescopes, is so much more than they've ever had in the past. And it's, going exponentially. Every year they get more powerful. That they can... once upon a time, they could only look at a couple of wave bands. Now they can simultaneously search thousands of wave bands with the same instrument at the same time. So they've got this huge amount of information. And I think, and I certainly hope, that in my lifetime we'll see that come to fruition. He certainly believes it. Well,
I think that we are very close, and I've heard things, as you research these areas, that and let's just quickly say, obviously there is a cover-up that has been ongoing.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's no doubt about that. There has been a cover-up of all of the evidence and information that exists. They have been trying to twist it and get people confused. 1 minute you're looking this way and then you're looking that way. Oh, it's weather balloon. No, it's swamp fog. It's whatever.
Yeah, it's a rocket. It's
yes. So it just to confuse people. But nevertheless, for those that have stuck the course and believe, there's enough evidence that cannot be refuted. And I wanted to ask you, people have been coming forward because there is this, we call it this shadow, this cabal that exists within governments. The US has it very, very badly. Of course, we have it badly here in the UK too. But I mean, yes, we have in the UK released important documents and things, but the US still resist in even releasing any information. They want to hold on to the very last minute to reveal anything. But we have had astronauts, people like Dr. Edgar Mitchell and people like that, coming forward and giving testimony to the Senate and to to try to brief people.
That's right.
Because I think the confusion is that, oh, well, if there was life out there, wouldn't the government tell us?
No.
And people make that innocent mistake, don't they?
Yeah. I don't know why they're not telling us. The only logical explanation, which isn't even really a good explanation, is that by telling the population they will, cause a mass panic.
Well, they always use that argument, but, I mean, come on, we're not children.
Yeah, I know that as well, and I've been looking recently at least a dozen astronauts who have said on air that they had seen things. In fact, the very first moon landing, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong both saw two enormous saucer-shaped craft.
Yeah, I've heard that.
On the lip.
On the side of them, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I heard that's what helped them get there.
Well, let me read this short exchange to you.
Okay.
It says, a certain professor who wished to remain anonymous was engaged in a discussion with Neil Armstrong during a NASA symposium. Professor, what really happened out there with Apollo 11? Armstrong, it was incredible. Of course, we'd always known there was a possibility. The fact is, we were warned off by the aliens. There was never any question then of a space station or a moon city. Professor, how do you mean warned off? Armstrong, I can't go into details except to say that their ships were far superior to ours in size and technology. Boy, were they big and menacing. No, there was no question of a space station. And Armstrong and Aldrin took, I think it was photographs, I'm not sure if it's photographs or video, of these craft, which disappeared and have never been disclosed. They've never seen them. When they came back to Earth, the cameras were taken away, which is normal practice to get the films processed and the photographs processed, and they were magically spirited away. So these two guys saw them. They told, ground control, they told their bosses, we saw them, they're there, believe us. Look, here's the evidence. Oh, the evidence is gone. It's gone missing.
Well, this is the thing that I've heard is that yes, they came back and they were briefed, and then they were also threatened not to speak.
Yeah, I believe that. Absolutely, I believe that.
And I think I've even heard accounts that they were also put under great deep hypnosis as well to forget things, to push it to the back of their minds. And of course, we think it was Neil Armstrong who basically just didn't speak.
Yeah, he just retired from public life at all.
Disappeared. He didn't
he just couldn't handle that.
Yeah. And obviously something spooked him. Something warned him off from opening up his mouth. Yep. But this is what's so wonderful with where we are now, which you were saying earlier in the show about this paradigm shift. We are now starting to see en masse more and more people in authority, generals, ex-generals, sergeants, people who've worked in pilots, yes.
Yeah.
Pilots,
policemen.
Pilots are seeing so many things. People that are flying the planes. I mean,
and they have done since the war. During the war, they called them Foo Fighters. The British and American pilots thought they were some weapon or reconnaissance vehicle developed by the Germans. And after the war ended and German files were found, apparently the German pilots were seeing them and thinking, this is something the British or the Americans has made. They both blamed each other. And all the records clearly show that these things, although they were small, so they're probably just surveillance, although they were small, they could outperform their aircraft at every turn. They could outpace them, they could outturn them. They couldn't do anything about them.
Well, this is what Roy Dutton, who I was speaking about before earlier in the show, this is what he had said, was that the eye accounts, the witnesses that saw what they saw, they said that these craft, they moved in ways that they'd never seen. And that's how you know it's just not something we're able to do yet.
That's right.
And we are running out of time, believe it or not. It goes so quickly.
It does.
But I just wanted to leave the interview on this note, because this also came through very strongly in the book as well. And for those who might be interested, please do get a copy. It's called The Watchers by G.K. McLaren. But this idea of consciousness, how do I put this? If we want to get to the point now where we are becoming part of the galactic family, meaning all of us on the Earth and things finally accept that A, we're not alone, and B, there is a bigger picture and bigger story out there, we also have to be changing the way that we think. And it's not just, for our everyday life, but it's in the way that we understand how science works, how interdimensionality works, how gravity works. All these things have to also grow and blossom as well for the technology to get bigger, for us to be able to go further and expand and become watches ourselves, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
But that came through strongly in your book about the ET contact that was had. These people, they were like us and they were warring and things, but then they moved forward. They opened up their consciousness. So maybe you might want to say a few words about that as we close the show.
Well, really, we've got to get ourselves together if we want to progress beyond destroying each other. We've got to move in the same direction. Forget about the colour that somebody is, their creed, their religion. None of these things are important. The important thing is there's a big, wide universe out there, which hopefully at some point will have the resources again to go out and explore properly. In the meantime, accept the fact that these people are doing the same thing. They're coming to explore us. There's so much evidence, and it's hindered largely by the person that comes out of the pub and sees things. That doesn't do anything for the credibility, or the hoaxer. That does nothing for the credibility.
But there are paid hoaxes as well.
Yeah, exactly. But there's so much good, strong evidence from NASA astronauts, from Russian astronauts, from Air Forces, Air Forces and civil pilots all over the world, from policemen. In an 11-year period, there was more than 450 reports of UFOs involving 900 policemen, yet we don't trust them. We trust them to keep us safe, but talk about UFOs, no, you can't be trusted. That's ridiculous.
And I think also we need to get beyond this mindset of sending probes to Mars. And why not send these probes to these other places that we're discovering as well? Let's try and get out of the repetition that we're in and go beyond our boxes and go a bit further afield and, And
if we can stop spending money on weapons and start spending it on exploration. And
really try to make contact with these places and see what is there. I mean, that star system... Gliese, 20 light years away. It's not too far, But again, it's the mind, isn't it? It's the mindset. It's consciousness.
It is the mindset.
We have to grow,
Indeed.
So, I think you're with me. I mean, disclosure is around us, isn't it?
I think so, and I think it will only get better. I think we'll see more and more as time progresses, and hopefully more people will come out of the closet saying, well, look, I'm old now, I can tell you what happened without worrying about losing my job, or and hopefully that'll happen.
And I think we have to get beyond that, it's going to be announced on BBC Evening News at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Just open up your eyes, and people are, as you say, putting their lives on the line and already getting information out.
Yeah, indeed.
You don't have to scratch too far to find it, do you?
No, you don't.
So I want to thank you, George, for
thank you.
joining me this evening.
It's been fun.
You have to come back again,
Well, I'll try and come back again.
You'll have to be my resident scientist on my show.
At some point in the future, I'd love to come back again.
Yeah, well, we have to do this again sometime soon and talk further, because there's so much to talk about.
It's a huge subject.
It is, indeed. Well, that's it, guys. I'm going to close George's mic, and as I say, check out the book. It's it's an enjoyable read and well written as well, and I don't say that lightly. So, the end of another show, and I will be back next week, as I am currently doing esoteric discussions on a weekly basis. As I always say, until next time, keep your eyes on the stars.
Peterborough FM, one station, many communities.